Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to make some Panko crusted fried salmon with Orzo pasta and a lemon parmesan cream sauce and asparagus, a little fresh basil, and then we're going to bake up our mini sourdough bowls. So I have my little mini Dutch ovens here preheated. So we are going to get all of them scored, and then we're going to put them in their little mini Dutch ovens to bake up. So each one has a different flavor, which will be, it's always fun because then you have just a nice little tasty treat of lots of different flavors. So I believe this one's our cinnamon swirl one. And I'm again just going to do my simple little, square score on them, or crisscross on a square. Keep it simple for this. And just cut it right across. We made the dough to this yesterday, and then we laminated them and put our inclusions in them last night, and they've been cold proofing in the oven or in the refrigerator. And now we're gonna have them go on. This looks like it's my pesto parmesan. I think that was my olive and feta cheese one. Brush a little bit of this extra flour off. Here we go. And this one's my everything bagel. I know that one because it's really distinctive on the outside here. There we go. Again, I'm just going to brush it a little bit to the side. And then we're going to score. Got to make sure I get through the seeds when I'm scoring here. There we go. And again, we'll pop those to the side. Got two more. We're running out of space on this calendar or this counter here. And I'm going to slide this guy out on here as well. I think this one's my strawberry preserve one, which has it kind of swirled throughout. And then we've got one more. We'll do it right over here. I find it's easier to score all of them and then take the lids off and put them in instead of kind of make it like an assembly line. Here we go. And get it. This is a strawberry preserve. So, oh, pepperoni. That's what those red things are. Okay. So now I'm going to take off the lid and we'll drop each one of these into my mini Dutch ovens. And these have been preheating in the oven at 500 for the last hour, so they're nice and hot, and it will kind of seal in the heat. So they're very hot, so make sure you use a glove when you're putting them in. There we go. Try to drop them down. That's my cinnamon swirl going in. This is the olive and feta cheese. And I keep them on a little baking sheet when I pop them in and out of the oven because it's easier to take one tray out than to try to put 6 of these little guys in here. And that was our pesto parmesan. And then, of course, it's kind of hard not to know what this one is. This is our everything bagel sourdough loaf. And so it's nice and hot in there. And this is our mozzarella and pepperoni sourdough loaf. Let's get these on. Now we're going to go pop this in the oven and let it cook at 20 minutes at 500 degrees. And then we are going to let it cook. Take the lids off, and then we're going to cook it for about 13 minutes with the lids off at 450. And so it cooks a little bit less than our mini or our regular size sourdough because they're smaller. There we go. But that tray is so heavy because each one of those little Dutch ovens is cast iron. So it is hot or heavy, heavy, heavy. Okay, 20 minutes on. Good. Everything. Didn't clear anything off. And now we are going to drop our orzo in, let our orzo cook up while we start prepping the panko, like our breading for our salmon. So I've got a half a bag of orzo. A little bit of orzo goes a long way. So you don't need, I never use a whole bag for my family. A half tends to work perfectly for it because it does expand much more than rice does. We're going to put a couple pinches of salt in here because we're going to reserve a little bit of this salty or starchy water to our for our like sauce to make it a little bit richer. And give it a good stir. Okay, and we're going to let that get nice and tender. While we're doing that, I'm just going to slide this out of the way and put it up here. We don't need this quite yet. And we're going to work on our breading for our salmon. So now, normally I always cook, I do like maybe a pan sear on the salmon or whatnot. But today I have frozen salmon, which is not quite as nice as fresh salmon. So I'm actually going to do a breading on it, a panko breading on it, which will give you this crispy outside, but you'll still have that nice salmon flavor in the inside, which I think works well with a like not as nice cut of salmon or a fresh cut of salmon. So we're going to start with about 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour because we're going to make a breading for it. And typically I just bread like my white fishes, but we're going to do it today because I just kind of have a feeling for it. We're going to add in a good, I want to say, tablespoon of Italian spices or Italian seasoning. That's going to give it just a nice kind of flavor that will pair well with this pasta, with the orzo and the asparagus. We're going to do about a half a tablespoon of paprika, which will give it savory flavor, but again, a nice golden fry when we cook it up. We're going to add in some dried oregano, about, I want to say, a teaspoon or so, because oregano is delicious and it will just be popping in this. And then we've got some onion powder. We're going to want about a tablespoon to give it a good savory flavor. And then we're going to put in about, a teaspoon and a half of garlic salt. I'm going to grab a fork. We'll mix that up. You want to make sure you season your dredge very, very well. So you might feel like, oh, that's a lot of spices for a little bit. Trust me, you need to have a lot of spices in here because you're just going to have a little bit on your fish, and you want to make sure it has all that flavor in there because this is the time to season up the fish so it's not bland. Okay, so I'm going to mix this all around. Then we'll mix up our eggs, and then I'll add some panko breadcrumbs into this after we're done dredging. So let's get our eggs mixed up. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. I was deciding between 3 and 4, but I always err on having a little extra versus running out because I don't want to have to get back in here and add another egg halfway through my dredging process. So I'm going to kind of pop these, and then we're going to give a quick whisk until we've got all of those egg whites kind of mixed up into the yolk because we don't want to have any big snotty egg white pieces for this. There we go. Grab a couple of those egg whites. You just kind of have to just break them up a little bit. Okay, and then let me get my panko breadcrumbs prepped so that they'll be ready to pour in there when it's time. Okay, so the trick with this is when you're doing your dredging and everything like that, try to just use one hand to keep everything clean. So we're going to go into our flour or seasoned dredge first for this and coat every one of our fishes, our salmon, up with this. Here we go. And pat it on. And this is just going to kind of create a nice binder for when we do our nice, big, thick, crunchy layer of our coating. So this is key to making everything stick together. But again, this is great to kind of use, like frozen salmon just never cooks up as well as fresh salmon. So I'm like, let's bread it today. Let's see how it is. I've never actually breaded salmon. So I do all sorts of other fish. So I'm like, you know what? Why not? I actually think it's going to be really delicious.
You have a question, are they thawed?
They are thawed completely. So I kind of left them in the fridge overnight and then they thawed out and then I kind of patted them dry. Always with frozen fish, you need to make sure you pat it dry before you use it because otherwise it can be a little waterlogged. Okay, so we've got these guys, all things. And now I'm going to add in about a cup of panko breadcrumbs into here. And this is going to give us a nice crunch on the salmon. I'm going to give it a shake. There we go. And then I'm just going to use my messy hand and we're going to mix it together so that when we do after we do our egg wash dip, we'll have a nice, good, crunchy second layer, which is also why I always say it's very important to season up the dredge because that's the first layer that touches your fish and you want to have all that flavor on there. Because if you're going to go through the work to fry up your own fish and bread it, you don't want it to be bland in the end. There we go. Just pat this guy on. Make sure. There we go. So first one down. Second one in. I actually think my kids are really going to, my kids love salmon. My husband, on the other hand, does not. And I think he'll prefer this method of salmon over my normal way of cooking up salmon. So we'll see. Maybe I'll have finally converted him to salmon being so delicious. Let's pat this guy. And nice. And then, see, I was trying to, the other day I was like watching a, video, like a little short, I guess, pop up. And somebody made like literally an asparagus and orzo kind of cream dish with essentially like a, like a Wiener Schnitzel, or like a pounded chicken that's been breaded and fried. So I was like, oh, well, I've got salmon and we can make this almost same dish on there. So I'm like, hey, love the inspiration. As you guys know, I always like to change my meals up and don't often repeat things because I just like to be adventurous. I'm not one to do the same thing over and over again. Sometimes sometimes I'll be on a theme where I'm like, I'm going to have this in every one of my recipes for a while. And then I'm like, okay, we're done with that. Okay. This is also, guys, this is the reason why you use one hand, because now I've got a free hand to work with in case I need to, versus trying to go scrub my hands clean on here. So let's pat this guy up, get them all coated. We got one more after this, and it looks like we're going to have the perfect amount of dredge. That's always makes me happy when I've got like very little waste. Probably could have gotten by with 3 eggs, but again, always err on having extra because it's not fun if I have to go grab another egg right now. There we go. Pat this down in here. And voila, we've got our salmon all breaded. I'm going to take this over here and wash my hands. You get all this off. Takes always a hot minute. Okay. And back to having clean hands. Okay, let's get this. We're going to fry up our salmon towards the end because it cooks up really, really fast. So we don't want to waste, we don't want to cook it now and then have it be cold with our dinner. So I'm going to just wipe my little counter right here from my little spillage. And then we're going to prep our vegetables for our kind of our pasta and our sauce. So I've got, I almost threw my fork away. I wasn't paying attention. We're going to have asparagus, a yellow onion in there. And then I've got to get some lemon zest going. But it's going to be a really light kind of, we'll use a little bit of cream to make it a little bit richer, but nice, refreshing kind of pasta. And then I have some fresh basil. I went and picked out in the garden. And of course, when I went out there, the mosquitoes were out and I got like 3 huge mosquito bites on my head and like 10 out of them. In like the 5 minutes it took me to go and pick my basil and turn on my sprinkler to water the plants. There we go. But I did find like 15 cherry tomatoes that were ripe. So I was like, ooh, big harvest. Gotta think of something to do with them. Okay. I'll slide this off. And I'm just going to do nice kind of thin slices that we'll then do in a kind of a mince up. I don't know if I'm actually going to use my whole onion. I think I might just use half of it. We'll save the other half for another day. So just nice smaller mincing on here because I don't want it to be too big. We are using Orzo pasta, which is kind of, it's not much, it's a little like twice the size of a rice, like a grain of long grain rice. So it's a more delicate pasta. So I don't want the onions to be overpowering in either texture or flavor with there. So nice smaller ones.
You have a question, do you compost?
I don't. I was talking to my husband about this, saying I want to create a big compost pile and whatnot because we have lots of like trees and everything like that. But we have like leaves that are great for, composting as well and just garden matter plus all of our food scraps. And so that's kind of one of our like projects is to build like a stick area to store our sticks and then a compost area so that I have kind of nice fresh dirt for our garden beds, and then you just don't have as much waste going into the trash cans as well. So I'm going to cut off the bottom inch of my asparagus. When you buy asparagus, this bottom inch is going to be dry and fibrous, so it'll be like you're chewing on a stick. So cut it off. It's not going to be delicious at all for this. And then we're actually going to slice this up to go into our Orzo pasta. So we'll have, of course, the ones that have the nice kind of tops, and then we're going to have just a few, go in here. I'm slicing mine at kind of a pretty angle, just so they look a little bit prettier instead of a flat cut. There's no reason for that other than to make it more pretty. But instead of just cutting straight down, just cut at an angle, like in a diagonal, and then you'll have a slightly prettier cut on your asparagus. And I'm just simply wanting nice kind of bite-sized pieces. And while each piece is not going to have the lovely, delicious top to them, asparagus is great. The stalks are delicious, so they'll be just nice. And they keep their texture. They're nice and firm. Let's add our oil in here to start getting warmed up for our salmon. I just want to have a nice kind of coating on the bottom of my pan. We do not need so much oil that it's covering the fish. Just a nice thin layer because we will be flipping and crisping up on both sides. So this is not like a deep fried, like where you're dropping in, but we're going to fry it in the oil on both sides. And I find it just doesn't waste quite as much oil doing it this way. I'm going to start warming it up, and then we'll have that nice and hot to fry off our pan. I'm going to test one of our Orzo. Orzo takes a lot longer to cook than most people realize, so I'm not sure if it's ready yet, but I'll get some of our starchy water here. Still firm, so needs a little bit longer, but while it's cooking there, let me grab, I think, because we want about a cup of starchy water here. So I'll ladle it out, and then these should be, here we go. So we'll just ladle this in. I'm going to try not to catch any of the Orzo for this, but it does take a good, and this is going to thicken up our sauce for it. It's going to give it a nice kind of velvety texture, and just does really well for like thickening it without having to add in like any extra additional thickeners. And it gives a good flavor. So just about a cup in there. Okay, we can get our strawberries prepping for our dinner as well, because we're going to have strawberries as our fresh fruit. Since our oil needs a minute, let me give them a quick rinse. Shake them out. I was deciding whether to do a honeydew or fresh strawberries, and I was like, strawberries, we haven't cut them up in a while. Grab this. We're going to just slice them up in there and sprinkle them with just a pinch of sugar. That makes them a little bit more delicious. Just testing my heat there, making sure. Because with the olive oil, you don't want to heat it up too high, because it has a smoking point a little after like 400. I like to fry right around 350, which is kind of like you heat it up and then you turn it down to medium, and it kind of keeps it at that, which will give you a nice kind of golden fry on your whatever you're frying up. Here, get our strawberries prepped in there. We've got about 2 minutes or so left on our sourdough before we need to take the lids off. And then it will be kind of like everything prepping down. We'll strain the orzo, start cooking up and making our pasta here. And we'll chop up our basil. I've got fresh basil that's going to go with our pasta. We're going to do this like lemon, garlic, Parmesan kind of cream, light cream sauce. I say cream lightly. We'll use a little bit, but it's not going to be a really rich cream sauce for it. That will kind of coat everything.
You have a question. Do you recommend the hex-clad pans?
Oh, I absolutely love the hex-clad pans. I got mine about 2 years ago. And I've got like the 12-inch, the 10-inch, the 8-inch, and then I've got the 12-inch griddle pan, and love them. They are really easy to clean, which is a bonus. They cook up really nicely. They are nonstick. I don't ever have stuff sticking on them. And so far, they have survived me in the kitchen, and I'm pretty rough on my kitchenware. And I haven't scratched a single one yet. So I highly recommend them. I was really iffy at first because they were expensive, but well worth it. 2 years, no scratch, go there. I do have them in my Amazon storefront, as long as all my other cooking gadgets in there, because if I like it and I love it, I put it in there, because it's something I've recommended, because it works well for us. Let's see. Let's do our drop test. Not quite yet. I want it to sizzle right away, not like, things. So this needs a few more minutes to kind of heat up. But since we're almost done with our, our sourdough, we're going to go over there, start taking them off, because that's about to beep here in about 30 seconds. So we're going to I always take the whole thing out because it's just easier that way. And this is always where we're going to see whether we have a good thing. Ooh, looking good. That's our strawberry one, our pesto, our everything bagel. This is our cinnamon swirl, our olive and feta cheese, and our mozzarella and pepperoni loaf. So it looks like they are doing pretty fantastic. We're going to pop them back in the oven now. I'm going to turn my heat down to 450, and these are going to cook for about 13 minutes at 450. So let's cancel this out. Bring it down to 450 and 13 minutes. So my normal loaf, my big one that I do, I normally cook at 450 for 20 minutes, But for this one, you don't need to cook it as long because they're much smaller. But our oil is nice and hot here. I can see it sizzling. So we're going to pop in our first round of fish. And then our orzo should be just about ready. I just slide it right over here. And let's grab a spatula and tongs. There we go. And now we're going to cook our batches. We're going to do 2 batches at a time, or like 2 batches of this. So I'll fry up half and half. You don't want to overcrowd your pan. You want to make sure there's enough space between each fish to kind of crisp up nicely. Here we go. And I'm going to turn my oil down to about a 4 because, again, I don't want it to burn. I want it to get nice and golden brown. So the oil's hot, and then we'll turn it down. Let's check our orzo. I'll sneak one out, but I'm fairly certain it should be soft. We want to cook our orzo to an al dente, so not too soft. Perfect, because it's going to soak up some of our sauce and flavor, so you don't want to overcook it to where then it gets, too mushy when we cook it up. So we'll dump this guy out. Perfect. And since we're going to be tossing it back into our sauce, I'm not going to coat it with oil. It will break apart just fine when we're doing it here. But now we need our big pan. We're going to toss in a little bit of olive oil. This is a big pan. I'm going to use a little bit more. And let's turn our burner on to about a 6. And then we'll probably turn it down a little bit here once it gets nice and hot. Pop these guys in. We're going to let them saute up. Once they get translucent, we're going to add in some garlic, and then we'll add in our asparagus. And we'll start making our sauce, and then we'll add in our orzo towards the end. Let's get our tongs here. Give this a nice little stir around. I'm going to break up any of our onion pieces here. And I'm going to get a baking sheet out, and I'm going to line it with some paper towel so that when we're ready to take the fish out, I'm going to put it on the paper towel to absorb any of the extra oil so that it's nice and crispy and not soggy. You could also put it on like a cookie drying rack, a cooling rack, but I find paper towels work well, and then I use the paper towels when they're done to soak up the extra oil in my pan. Okay, let's get ready. These are looking, I typically look for when I see a nice kind of golden brown, crispy edges. So I'm going to flip this over. We should be getting close. Got this nice kind of golden brown. Beautiful. And yeah, this one's looking here. Pretty. So nice, lovely golden brown. I'm going to just rotate my pan. The paprika in there helps give it a nice kind of rich color. Let's check on our onions here. Perfect. We're starting to get nice and translucent. You can see a couple of them are popping off the hot pan. Okay, since they've got a good kind of translucent color to it, we are going to add in our garlic. You just always want to make sure those onions get past that opaqueness, because once we start adding in other vegetables and whatnot, the onions aren't going to get quite as much heat, which means they're not going to cook up as nicely.
You have a question? Do you post the recipes?
We upload all of our videos on the link on our page. So you can always go back and rewatch. And I always make sure I go through every step when I'm doing it so that you could always recreate these at home, recipes at home. I do post for my members every week. I post about 2 to 3 recipes cards every week for my members. Those do take me a little bit longer, so we have those for just our members, but we do have the videos for everybody. And you should be able to recreate everything from just rewatching the video. Here we go. We're gonna give this a good stir up. Now with garlic, you always have to watch it. It cooks up really, really fast in a hot pan. So it can go from nice and golden brown to burnt in, a snap of your fingers. So you just want to have it in there for about 30 seconds to a minute before we start adding in our next vegetables. We're going to add in our asparagus now. Here we go. And then I'm going to give this a nice toss. And we're going to just let it kind of we'll know that it's nice and tender when it gets this nice, bright, vibrant green. And it shouldn't take too long for it to get to that stage. But I'm just going to spread it out so that there's kind of an equal thing on it.
You have a question? Do you have a link for all the pans you use?
They are in my Amazon storefront. So there's a link on our page to our Amazon storefront, and in there they should be under the pots and pans list that I have. So I have all of my stuff in there. I have both my all-clad and my hex-clad because those are kind of the two that I use everything. And then I have Le Creuset or the Dutch ovens that I use. But I love them. I will say my all-clad I've had for going on 16 years. Love them, love them, love them. They've lasted. I've said, when I find a good product, I recommend it. Like I've had my Woodstock knives for 16 years too, and they still cut amazingly. So yes, they're a bit more expensive, but I have not needed to buy a new knife in 16 years. So that's kind of like a win. Let's check our fish here. Just about. I'm going to make sure we get this nice kind of rich golden color to it. There. Looking good. Let's start mincing up. We're going to mince up our fresh basil that we're going to sprinkle on, and then we're going to actually make our sauce here in just a second. Let's mince up, but I see over here needs a little bit of a quick stir first. Okay, and you can see here when I told you how like some of them you can see are getting this really vibrant green. That's when we know that they're getting nice and tender crisp. If they start to turn a yellowish brown, that means you've overcooked them. And if they're still a paler green like this, that means they're undercooked. So they're a bit, they're more opaque. Let's start making our sauce that's going to go in there, and then we'll chop up our basil. Our basil will go on at the very end because I want that nice fresh flavor to pop in. I'm going to add in about 4 tablespoons of butter. We're going to let that melt right here in the middle. Let me grab my lemon and my Parmesan grater, which is the best zester that you can get. And I'm going to zest my lemon into this. This is going to give it just a really bright, lovely lemon flavor. That's not super overpowering, but will be delicious in here. And there we go. And we're going to probably use about, I want to say, a teaspoon or so of zest. There we go. Oop, I almost lost my lemon in there. And I'm not going to use all of the lemon for it because that will be a little bit too overpowering, but I'm going to use like half of my lemon in here. There we go. Let's give this a good little stir here. I'm going to turn it down. But you can see I've got our butter going. We're going to have that all melted up, and then we're going to add in our starchy pasta water that we have reserved. So I'm going to do a little at a time. Don't add in too much, or you're going to like flood it and you're not going to get the great kind of thickening up of it. So I'm going to let that simmer for a second. We'll add a little bit more, but I believe our first round of our fried salmon is ready to come off here. Beautiful, nice golden brown. You want to put it the oil side down so that it continues to get nice and soak up that extra grease. Beautiful. Wonderful. Now we can kind of put our last fillets in, and we'll let them fry up. And I'm just going to go check the time that we have on our sourdough because I have a feeling it's going to be done soon. There we go. So we've got these in here. I'm going to turn it down just a smidge to about, 4 out of 5. Yep, we've got 2 minutes left on our sourdough. So we are making perfect timing. Okay, let's add in the rest of our starchy water here. Again, I'm just going to go nice and slow. I'm going to turn it up. I want it to come to a nice simmer. But this starchy water is going to help thicken up my sauce without needing to add any thickeners like flour or cornstarch. It just uses that starch from the pasta water. Let's grab our, my oregano. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of garlic salt in here.
We're going to request to go through the process of breading it.
Yes. So for our for our breading on our salmon, what we did is we made a seasoned dredge. So I had about 1.5 cups of flour, and then I added in about a tablespoon of Italian spices, a teaspoon of dried oregano, half a tablespoon of onion powder, half a tablespoon of paprika, and about half a tablespoon of garlic salt. Mix that up. We dredged our fish with that. Then we mixed up about 4 eggs to kind of scramble them. And then I added about a cup of panko breadcrumbs into the dredging after we've dredged all the fishes. And then I took the dredged fish into the egg wash and then into the mixture with the panko. And that gives you this lovely just crust on it. There we go. We're getting this simmer. Okay, I'm going to add in some oregano, dried oregano, about, a teaspoon or so, and then just a little bit of onion powder. That's just going to give you a nice little savory flavor to it. And we'll go get ours in just a second, but I'm going to turn this down and we're going to add in a little bit of our cream, and then we're going to go get our sourdough out of the oven. I'm going to add in about, right now, 1/4 of a cup. We might add a little bit more. Again, I don't want it to be a super heavy sauce, but more of a lighter one. We're going to let it kind of steam here. I'm going to move this so we can get our sourdough over here because it's going to be hot coming in, and I don't want to have thing. Let's grab.
Do you have a question? Do you ever make catfish?
Yes, I actually do. When I see it, I will buy it because I do love catfish. And then I make like homemade tartar sauce with it because I find it's absolutely lovely. I'm going to just move this over here real quick because we're going to have to do our little double thing. Okay. So we've got our beautiful little itty bitty sourdough bowls coming out. And these are going to be delicious. So again, I do the little Dutch ovens on a baking sheet because it's just so much easier to maneuver them. But we're going to take them out of here because we want them to get off of the Dutch oven. This is our pesto parmesan cheese mini loaf. They're very hot. This is our strawberry preserves mini loaf. It's a little bit hard to do it with my bare hands. And this is our cinnamon swirl loaf. Our everything bagel loaf. As you can see, all those bagel spices popping. And just look at this light golden brown crust on the bottom. It's just perfect. This is our olive, feta cheese, and Italian spice loaf. And then, this will be my husband's favorite right here, our mozzarella and pepperoni loaf. So delicious. 6 different little mini loaves and flavors, but one bake session. So that's always a win. We'll move these just right over here because they're quite hot. And then let's finish up our dinner here. We're almost done. We're down to like the final stretch. Okay, let's give this a little toss. We're going to be ready to add our orzo in just a second, but I want to see if our fish is ready to flip first. Yep, perfect. Nice golden brown color on it. Lovely. And again, this is just a great way to use frozen salmon that isn't necessarily as nice just cooked up in the traditional methods. Okay, let's toss our orzo pasta in. Now, I'll probably come down in a big brick, but don't worry. It will break apart really easy once we introduce it to the sauce. And you want to cook your orzo to an al dente. You don't want to overcook it because you want it to soak up this extra really delicious flavor of the sauce in there. So if you overcook it, then you're going to have more of a mushy pasta. Here we go. And then I'm going to turn this down to my very lowest setting, and because we're just going to let it simmer and soak up that extra flavor. But we're going to also sprinkle some Parmesan cheese on here. And we're going to let it steam as it kind of melts over, and then we'll mix it in. But we want to let it steam up first. I'm going to just sprinkle a little over the top. That way it can steam up. And then we're going to mince up our fresh basil to add into our pasta. Okay, so here's all the basil I went out and picked from our garden and got bit by like 50 mosquitoes while I was out there. Here we go. I'm going to mince this guy up. So nice and small. The more cuts you put on the basil, the more flavor that will come out. And I like to add it in at the very end because that's going to keep its flavor really fresh. Okay, we'll be just about ready to add this in. Let's mix it up. Now we can see it's starting to steam. Some of our Parmesan is starting to melt. So I'm going to give it a good stir now. Kind of toss it in there.
You have a question. How often do you have to sharpen your knives?
I sharpen my knives probably like every 2 weeks or so. And I have a lot of heavy use out of my knives. But when I start to notice them snagging on either tomatoes, onions, or peppers, that's when I know it's time to sharpen them up. Okay, let's toss in our fresh basil here. And again, this basil is just going to pair really well with that lemon flavor that we have from the zest and the lemon juice. And then I'm going to check my salmon over here. I'm going to turn this off because that is ready. And these should be ready here as well. Let's check them out. Yep, these are just about done. Perfect. So I'm going to just let them cook, but I will grab our plate and we can actually start serving up our dinner. I'm going to see. I think we'll serve up over here. That way we can see our pretty sourdough mini loaves that we have baked up. Let's grab a plate. And I'm going to grab my shovel. I love my shovel. Okay, so for dinner tonight, we will be having our lemon asparagus orzo pasta that's chock full of, orzo, asparagus, lemon zest, fresh basil, yellow onion. And then we made a nice rich sauce using parmesan, our starchy water that was left over, half the juice of a lemon, and some cream. So it just has just a lovely light lemony flavor to it. And then we are going to be serving it with our crispy fried salmon. I kind of did an Italian seasoning on the salmon so that it plays really well with our like lemon orzo pasta, but it has that panko crusted to it, so it'll have a nice crunch, but you'll still get that rich salmon flavor. And then we will also be having it with our mini sourdough loaves, our mini bowls. So the kids will have lots of different options to choose from. We've got our pesto parmesan, our mozzarella pepperoni, our olive, feta, and Italian herbs. This is a more of a dessert loaf. This is a strawberries preserved that's swirled throughout, a cinnamon swirl, and this is my oldest daughter's favorite, an everything bagel loaf. So they'll all get to choose and pick which ones they want for dinner tonight. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're cooking for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos through the link on the page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to that link, search for what we cooked for. So panko salmon with lemon asparagus orzo pasta. And then you can watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gadgets in there. I've got my knives, I've got the HexCAD our pans, our all-clad saute pan, all the different gadgets I use in my kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.